Princess was, of course, most anxious to entertain the Sultan in a fitting way. But as she had no experience in court customs, she ran to the talking bird and begged he would advise her as to what dishes should be served. "My dear mistress," replied the bird, "your cooks are very good, and you can safely leave all to them. Except you must be careful to have a dish of cucumbers stuffed with pearl sauce served with the first course." "Cucumbers stuffed with pearls?" exclaimed the princess. "Why, bird, who has ever heard of such a dish? The Sultan will expect a dinner he can eat, not one he can only admire. Besides, if I were to use all the pearls I possess, they would not be half enough." "Mistress," replied the bird, "do what I tell you, and nothing but good will come of it. As to the pearls, if you go at dawn tomorrow and dig at the foot of the first tree in the park on the right hand, you will find as many as you want." The princess had faith in the bird, who generally proved to be right, and taking the gardener with her early next morning, followed out his directions carefully. After digging for some time, they came upon a golden box fastened with little clasps. These were easily undone, and the box was found to be full of pearls. Not very large ones, but well shaped and with a good colour. So, leaving the gardener to fill up the hole he had made under the tree, the princess took up the box and returned to the house. The two princes had seen her go out and had wondered what could have made her rise so early. Full of curiosity, they got up and dressed, and met the sister as she was returning with the box under her arm. "What have you been doing?" they asked. "Did the gardener come to tell you he'd found a treasure?" "On the contrary," replied the princess, "it is I who found one." And opening the box, she showed her astonished brothers the pearls inside. Then, on the way back to the palace, she told them of her consultation with the bird and the advice it had given her. All three tried to guess the meaning of the singular counsel, but they were forced at last to admit the explanation was beyond them, and that they must be content blindly to obey. The first thing the princess did on entering the palace was to send for the head cook and order the repast for the Sultan. When she had finished, she suddenly added, "Besides the dishes I have mentioned, there is one that you must prepare expressly for His Majesty, and no one must touch but yourself. It consists of a stuffed cucumber, and the stuffing is to be made of these pearls." The head cook, who had never in all his experience heard of such a dish, stepped back in amazement. "You think I am quite mad," answered the princess, who perceived what was in his mind, "but I know quite well what I am doing. Go, do your best, and take the pearls with you." The next morning the princes started for the forest, and were soon joined by the Sultan. The hunt began and continued till midday, when the heat became so great that they were obliged to leave off. Then, as arranged, they turned their horses' heads towards the palace, and while Prince Bahman remained at the side of the Sultan, Prince Perviz rode on to warn his sister of their approach. The moment His Highness entered the courtyard, the princess flung herself at his feet, but he bent and raised her, and gazed at her for some time, struck with her grace and beauty, and also with the undefinable air of courts that seemed to hang around this country girl. "They are all worthy of one another," he said to himself, "and I am surprised that they think so much of her opinions. I am not surprised that they think so much of her opinions. I must know more of them." By this time the princess had recovered from the first embarrassment of the meeting, and proceeded to make her speech of welcome. "This is only a simple country house, sire," she said, "suitable to people like ourselves who live a quiet life. It cannot compare with the great city mansions, much less, of course, with the smallest of the Sultan's palaces." "I cannot quite agree with you," he said. "Even the little I have seen I admire greatly, and I will reserve my judgment until you have shown me the whole." The princess then led the way from room to room, and the Sultan examined everything carefully. "Do you call this a simple country house?" he said at last. "Why, if every country house was like this, the towns would soon be deserted. I am no longer astonished that you do not wish to leave it. Let us go into the gardens, which I am sure are no less beautiful than the rooms." A small door opened straight into the garden, and the first object that met the Sultan's eyes was the golden water. "What lovely coloured water!" he exclaimed. "Where is the spring, and how do you make the fountain rise so high? I do not believe there is anything like it in the world." He went forward to examine it, and when he had satisfied his curiosity, the princess conducted him towards the singing tree. As they grew near, the Sultan was startled by the sound of strange voices, but could see nothing. "Where have you hidden your musicians?" he asked the princess. "Are they up in the air or under the earth? Surely the owners of such charming voices ought not to conceal themselves." "Sire," answered the princess, "the voices all come from the tree which is straight in front of us. If you will deign to advance a few steps, you will see that they become clearer." The Sultan did as he was told, and was so wrapped in delight at what he heard that he stood some time in silence. "Tell me, madam, I pray you," he said at last, "how this marvellous tree came into your garden. It must have been brought from a great distance, or else, fond as I am of all curiosities, I could not have missed hearing of it. What is its name?" "The only name it has, sire," replied she, "is the singing tree, and it is not a native of this country. Its history is mixed up with those of the golden water and the talking bird, which you have not yet seen. If your highness wishes, I will tell you the whole story when you have recovered from your fatigue." "Indeed, madam," returned he, "you show me so many wonders that it is impossible to feel any fatigue. Let us go once more and look at the golden water, and I am dying to see the talking bird." The Sultan could hardly tear himself away from the golden water, which puzzled him more and more. "You say," he observed to the princess, "that this water does not come from any spring, neither is it brought by pipes. All I understand is that neither it nor the singing tree is native of this country." "It is as you say, sire," answered the princess, "and if you examine the basin, you will see that it is all in one piece. Therefore the water could not have been brought through it. What is more astonishing is that I emptied only a small flaskful into the basin, and it increased to the quantity you see now." "Well, I will look at it no more today," said the Sultan. "Take me to the talking bird." On approaching the house, the Sultan noticed a vast quantity of birds, whose voices filled the air, and he inquired why they were so much more numerous here than in any part of the garden. "Sire," answered the princess, "do you see that cage hanging in one of the windows of the salon? That is the talking bird, whose voice you can hear above them all, even above that of the nightingale, and the birds crowd to this spot to add their songs to his." The Sultan stepped through the window, but the bird took no notice, continuing his song as before. "My slave," said the princess, "this is the Sultan. Make him a pretty speech." The bird stopped singing at once, and all the other birds stopped too. "The Sultan is welcome," he said. "I wish him long life and all prosperity." "I thank you, good bird," answered the Sultan, seating himself before the repast which was spread at a table near the window. "And I am enchanted to see in you the Sultan and the king of the birds." The Sultan, noticing that his favourite dish of cucumber was placed before him, proceeded to help himself to it, and was amazed to find the stuffing was of pearls. "A novelty indeed," cried he, "but I do not understand the reason of it. One cannot eat pearls." "Sire," replied the bird, before either the princes or the princess could speak, "surely your highness cannot be so surprised at beholding a cucumber stuffed with pearls, when you believed without any certainty that the sultana had presented you with a dog, a cat, and a log of wood instead of children." "I believed it," answered the Sultan, "because the women attending on her told me so." "The women, sire," said the bird, "were the sisters of your sultana, who was so devoured with jealousy at the honour you had done her, that, in order to avenge themselves, invented this story. Have them examined, and they will confess their crime. These are your children, and who were saved from death by the intendant of your own gardens, and brought up by him as if they were his own." Like a flash, the truth came to the mind of the Sultan. "Bird," he cried, "my heart tells me that what you say is true. My children," he added, "let me embrace you, and embrace each other, not only as brothers and sisters, but as having in you the blood royal of Persia, which could flow in no nobler veins." When the first moments of emotion were over, The Sultan hastened to finish his repast, and then turning to his children, he exclaimed, "Today you have made acquaintance with your father. Tomorrow I will bring you the Sultana, your mother. Be ready to receive her." The Sultan then mounted his horse and rode quickly back to the capital. Without an instant's delay, he sent for the Grand Vizier and ordered him to seize and question the Sultana's sisters that very day. This was done. They were confronted with each other and proved guilty, and were executed in less than an hour. But the Sultan did not wait to hear that his orders had been carried out before going on foot, followed by his whole court, to the door of the great mosque. And with his own hand he drew the Sultana out of the narrow prison where she had spent so many years. "Madam," he cried, embracing her, with tears in his eyes, "I have come to ask your pardon for the injustice I have done to you, and to repair it as far as I may. I have already begun by punishing the authors of this abominable crime, and I hope that you will forgive me when I introduce you to our children, who are the most charming and accomplished creatures in the whole world. Come with me and take back your position and all the honour that is due to you." This speech was delivered in the presence of a vast multitude of people who had gathered from all parts on the first hint of what was happening, and the news was passed from mouth to mouth in a few seconds. Early next day, the Sultan and Sultana, dressed in robes of state and followed by all the court, set out for the country house of their children. Here the Sultan presented them to the Sultana one by one, and for some time there was nothing but embraces and tears and tender words. Then they ate of the magnificent dinner which had been prepared for them, and after they were all refreshed, they went out into the garden, where the Sultan pointed out to his wife the golden water and the singing tree. As to the talking bird, she had already made acquaintance with him. In the evening they rode together back to the capital, the princes on each side of their father, and the princess with her mother. Long before they reached the gates, the way was lined with people, and the air filled with shouts of welcome, with which were mingled the songs of the talking bird, sitting in its cage on the lap of the princess, and of all the birds who followed it. And in this manner they came back to their father's palace. Scheherazade, at this point, seeing that it was day, and knowing that the Sultan always rose very early to attend the council, stopped speaking. The morning came when the Sultan did not join his council at once. "Scheherazade," he said, "let it be understood that you shall reign as Sultana, and for now you are my beloved. It may be that in times men will say, 'Then lived Scheherazade, who was as wise as she was beautiful.'" The end.